Welcome to Personal Injury Law Unwrapped with Randy Ferguson.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Personal Injury Law Unwrapped with Randy Ferguson. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and in this episode, we're diving into another important topic about traumatic brain injuries or TBIs in personal injury cases and how these can complicate a case. So stay tuned for valuable insights that could help you make sure you or your loved one receive the compensation you deserve. Of course, I'm here with Randy Ferguson. Randy, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Proving a TBI is different from other personal injury claims. What are the potential long-term effects of a TBI, and how do you factor this into determining the amount of compensation that your clients should seek?
Well, they're hard to, in some ways, to prove. Again, you want to have excellent doctors. From a simple concussion to a serious brain injury, having the right medical treatment and the right experts to be able to come in and explain, what the person has, the long-term effects, the possible future medicals, the future treatments they'll need as to possibly medical care or permanent life, compensation to take care of them. They're very detailed, very costly cases in some ways to bring, because you're really going to have a lot of proper medical treatment. And usually with a serious brain injury, you're going to go to court and probably have to try that case if there's enough insurance to even go that far.
And the reason you say that is because of the dollar amount. Is that why they always go to court?
They're always serious amounts. I mean, with a serious brain injury, again, you're at that point where there's normally not enough insurance no matter what. Unless you're hit by an 18-wheeler or a corporation vehicle, a serious one could be worth millions or tens of millions of dollars to take care of somebody the rest of their life, or just if they have to be placed in a home or if they have to have constant care at home. And usually there's not enough insurance. And so taking those cases to court and trying them is very expensive. And if there's not a lot of insurance out there, sometimes it's a case where nobody's going to win.
So is it really like in those cases where there's not enough insurance, is that just like tough luck kind of thing? Is there any other recourse?
Well, again, usually what you say, there's really not. I mean, so if you get hit by an individual and they have just, let's say, an average policy of $100,300, which is a good policy overall, that's not going to pay for sometimes a year of treatment, depending on how bad that injury is. With a serious head injury, that's gone in no time. Now, of course, and then let's say if you have health insurance and that pays for your treatment, well, they want their money back. They want part of that money. So even if there was 100 and you have Blue Cross Blue Shield and they're not willing to waive it and they want their portion of it, there may not be enough to take care of you for a year. And so, if it's a serious injury and that's all the only option really is to apply for Social Security or something like that. And as well as I do, Social Security, it's not enough money to take care of anything. Of course, you can, try to get Medicare, Medicaid too.
To help out. Yeah. Okay.
But that rarely takes care of much.
Right. Yeah. What do you see as the most common causes of TBIs? Is it hits to the side of the car? Is it like I guess slip and falls you could too. There's a lot of different situations you could get one, I suppose.
Yeah, you can basically get a head injury in any kind of car accident. I mean, if you get hit from behind, normally you're going to hit your head on the windshield, which the most common accidents, of course, you're getting hit from behind. But you get a lot of serious brain injuries where there's side impact, T-bone type cases, also rollover cases. Yeah. And then again, if you get hit from behind like an 18-wheeler or something like that, just the impact of the vehicle and you hitting the steering wheel and things will do it. But they're usually really bad accidents.
Yeah. I know that it's not the symptoms are not just a concussion or a headache. There's long-term symptoms. There's all sorts of different things that can pop up later in life. What have you seen as far as the short and long-term symptoms of TBIs?
Well, memory issues are always one of them. Being unable to remember things, being unable to focus. A lot of times you can't do that, which means you can't maintain any kind of employment. Sometimes a daze where you get in dazes and you can't keep focused to do anything. In a lot of cases where people have serious brain injuries, of course, a client now I represented 30 years ago. He's been in a wheelchair since the accident. He's in a nursing home up in Tennessee. He can't take care of himself at all. So, he has to be helped in and out of bed, taken to the restroom. He has to be fed. And those are the worst ones. But a lot of times it's just you have headaches and it's hard to focus, those type of things. So it's kind of the norm if it's not a traumatic, really bad injury.
I would imagine it's challenging for you to advocate for clients when the symptoms of the traumatic brain injury are not really immediately visible. How do you handle those challenges?
Well, those are challenging in front of a jury because a jury, the way it is, people want to see something. They want to see like television, they want to see what your injury is. If you got a broken arm, I can show a jury a broken arm and I can show them the fracture. And with a brain injury, it's not that easy, depending on how bad it is. With some of them, it's very hard to get a jury to see what it is. And sometimes what you do is you do like a day in the life video showing what they can do and what they can't and what their day's like now versus what they used to do. Again, when you get into those things, though, again, you're looking at, there's got to be enough insurance out there to do those kind of things, to do the videos and hire the people to do the cost of what it's going to take care of them. There's got to be enough money on the other side to be able to do the case, or you basically will spend more money than you can possibly get.
Is there different pieces of evidence that are important to a TBI case that might be different from other personal injury claims?
Well, again, it's going to all come down to the test, the MRIs, CAT scans, and things of the brain. And then there's other tests that they will do, with neurologists and neurosurgeons and stuff that they can do to show, damages that you normally wouldn't see with x-rays and stuff. So there are some really good doctors out there, and we have some here in Huntsville and Decatur that can come in and testify to show where the injury is and what that part of the brain affects and stuff. So yeah, there's different tests that they can do to show why they're losing, their functions on this side of the body versus, they can't use their right arm or left arm or their memory and things. So there are definitely some different tests that they use now.
Do you often call neurologists or neurosurgeons to the stand? Is their testimony something that is important?
Yeah, well, with any doctor, juries take their testimony very serious because people want to think that doctors are not going to come to court and stretch the truth or whatever. And
right.
So, yeah, any doctor that you normally will put on the stand is going to strengthen that case. Neurologists, neurosurgeons, are great witnesses because, they can basically explain in common sense to a jury of here's what's going on. If you take a deposition and these things, you may have to pay a couple $1,000s to take their deposition because they don't want to come to court because they can make a lot more money sitting in their office and doing their job than coming to court. Mm-hmm. So normally we'd have to do depositions with them though, because it's just not cost efficient to make them come here and testify in the courtroom. And so you do a deposition by video and then you play the video for the jury.
Okay, got it. And what about family members, friends? Do you lean on their testimonies as well to see how maybe this person is different than they used to be since the accident?
Oh, yeah, especially spouses, husbands and wives of, he gets up and just stands there in a daze, or he can't remember anything anymore, can't feed himself, he can't use this arm, or he can't walk now. And so, yeah, they do. And they make really good witnesses on the stand after you offer the medical and stuff, for them to say how it's affected them and also affected their lives, because they can also have a claim for consortium because they're going to be taking care of them, for the rest of their lives or however long. So yeah, spouses are great witnesses in those kind of cases.
How do insurance companies handle TBIs? Like, because of the severity, obviously it's a severe injury. It's also a lot of hidden symptoms, as we talked about before. So how do you ensure that the insurance companies take the severity of a TBI seriously when you're negotiating a settlement?
Well, most insurance companies do take those cases serious because they understand, number one, how bad they can be and how much juries will return a verdict if the evidence is there. When you get to that point of a trial or anything, they're looking at what insurance coverage they have and how bad the verdict can be. Because I'm going to be honest with you, 95% of the cases, there's just not enough insurance to pay it. If it's not a big company or somebody with just at, a huge insurance policy, which there's just not many people out there that have $1 million above policies, personal policies. They take them serious because they understand a jury verdict. If you prepare your case right and you show it's going to cost $25 million to take care of them for 30 years, daily care, they take it serious.
But in that situation, is it you talked about how there's not enough insurance? Is that, if that $25 million settlement comes down, do the clients do they see that money ever? Or?
No, they don't. Again, you can only get what the insurance company's coverage is. If we can get a good settlement, if you properly do it, there's companies that do structured settlements, and you put that money in a structure that pays monthly or weekly for that. And so you can put in, a certain amount of money, and over 30 years, it'll draw interest if you structure the settlement right, and can make it go longer. If there's not 25 in coverage, 25 million and you get a verdict for 25, the client is going to be upset at their insurance company because they didn't settle to start with. And they can turn around and sue their insurance company because the insurance company did not pay it when they should have up front, whatever their coverage was. Otherwise, you're just not going to collect it if it's an individual. They can bankrupt it.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I mean, unless it's wantonness, you can bankrupt a judgment on a car accident.
We've mentioned or talked about on this podcast before about the importance of getting representation early so that you can get to the scene, see the evidence, all that stuff. I'd imagine that's a lot more difficult when there's a TBI involved because the medical situation is a lot more serious. Do you find these cases are a lot more challenging at the front end as well?
They're not a lot different at the front end because, again, it's still a car accident. It's still who's at fault. It's still, what treatment did they get, go by ambulance? What was their complaints at that point and everything? How bad is the property damage normally, which is much worse? And if there's clear liability, they were hit from behind or somebody ran a red light or whatever, up front, it's really not that much, different than anything else. It's proving the damage. You've got the liability. It's now proving what your damages are. And so with the right medical treatment, it's much easier to do. But up front, the liability and stuff's not much different.
What about, you mentioned when there's an 18-wheeler or company car or something like that, where there's a company behind it, how does that change the process as far as what can be awarded and how you go about your case?
Well, again, that's at the scene. They're going to have people at the scene normally. If it's an 18-wheeler, it's automatic. They're going to be there investigating it within 30 minutes. They've got people all over the state. That's what they're paid to get there and get it done. So they're trying to protect their client. Now, again, you're going to have a minimum with a trucking company, minimum $750,000 coverage. And then, of course, these major trucking companies have large umbrellas, sometimes $10, $20 million over them. And they also have, they have assets and they have money. You're not going to have to worry if you get hit and it's terrible and it's Walmart. Hey, Walmart's fine. They can cover it. That doesn't mean they're going to be easy to deal with and they're going to offer you what it's worth, but you're going to collect it. So, at the scene, they're going to get all the evidence and then they're going to try to defend it, that it's not their fault. But the liability is going to be the upfront issue with these trucking companies. And then the damages after that, the only good thing about it is, there's going to be coverage. So you can spend whatever it takes to get to court to get, your client the best outcome they can get.
Since we're talking about TBIs, does the process with the trucking companies, the insurance companies involved in the trucking companies, does that change at all when there's a TBI involved because of the seriousness of it? Or are they always going to try to give the least amount?
It depends on a number of things. One is, again, was their driver doing something against federal law? Had they used marijuana? Had they used drugs? Were they drinking? All those things open the door for huge jury verdicts and large settlements. Was the truck properly maintained? Did they properly keep their books? What is the history of that driver and this company for safety? So those kind of things are going to be different on liability. And those things will open a jury up to award more money when they see they violated federal laws. Were they overloaded? Did they properly have the cargo, stored so it didn't move and cause rollovers and stuff? So, the liability on that's going to be completely different. But the insurance company with a major, brain injury and they got clear liability, they're used to dealing with big dollars because 18-wheelers cause a lot of bad accidents or deaths. So those adjusters are kind of used to it. That's what they do. And so they do act different because they're dealing with a lot of money, but it's not just completely different than a regular car accident. They're used to dealing with big numbers versus $25,000 car accidents.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Big difference. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to Personal Injury Law Unwrapped with Randy Ferguson. To connect with Randy and the team, head to fergusonferguson.com and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. Randy, it's always great chatting with you. Thanks so much for being here.
All right. You take care.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.